Hello there. All right, let me hide that. Okay, can everybody see the slide okay?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I will start off by saying that I can't see any of you because I'm looking at my camera and also at my speaker notes. Just, not that I'm going to recite everything off my speaker notes, but it's helpful. So if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to make this conversational. Feel free to throw stuff in the chat. And President Helen offered to be my moderator. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat and she can pause me and I'm happy to answer questions along the way. Okay, so welcome to Salesforce Business Analysis, Guidance for Project Success. At the IIBA Ottawa-Outaouais. Did I get it? Ottawa? Yes? All right. Anyway, I can keep going. All right. So I already got a great introduction. But basically, I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for close to 14 years. I've worn a number of hats on Salesforce projects. I've been a BA, a lead BA, a user experience designer, a scrum master. I'm now a product owner at a fintech company called Mosaic. And I've also been mentoring and advising others on their Salesforce careers for probably 3 or 4 years now. And to that end, I kind of accidentally fell into hosting the Salesforce Career Show with Salesforce recruiter Josh Matthews. So thank you so much for inviting me today, you guys. And let's learn some stuff about Salesforce projects. So the things that we're going to touch on today. What makes Salesforce projects unique? So business analysts, there's a special way to kind of approach Salesforce projects, in my opinion. So we'll touch on that a bit. And also, what is Salesforce for folks that maybe are not as familiar with it? The role the business analysts play on Salesforce projects, some common Salesforce projects that I've run into in my career and some approaches to them, and resources to prepare for your Salesforce project. So first up, what makes Salesforce projects unique? So before we go into the uniqueness, we're going to talk a little bit about what is Salesforce. So there are 150,000 companies using Salesforce at a global scale since 2023. Companies that have not implemented a robust CRM for customer relationship management software, like Salesforce, are at a pretty hefty competitive disadvantage because they're probably managing their customers on, Google Sheets and Excel still, or I don't know, maybe Microsoft Access. I'm not sure what they're doing these days. But Salesforce, when it's the central source of truth for an organization, it really can be like the grease for your business operations, your day-to-day business operations, when done properly. I know that there are a lot of BA generalists. Salesforce BAs are considered a little bit more specialist, but you can even have deeper specialties in Salesforce. So I threw in some of the icons for some of the clouds that Salesforce has. Salesforce has been around since about 1999, and through a series of many acquisitions, it now pretty much has a business solution for just about everything. And something that you'll probably hear me say more than once is that it is impossible to know literally everything about Salesforce. The product suite is just too vast. But the important thing to know about Salesforce is that it's a platform. It's a platform that can be built upon. It's cloud-based. So Salesforce, based on the International Data Corporation, the IDC, which I've never heard of before, but sounded very authoritative, has ranked Salesforce as the #1 CRM provider for the 10th consecutive year. So all this basically to say, Salesforce is a really powerful tool. A lot of companies use it, and it being a platform, it's not, maybe to date myself a little bit, but it's not the, install the CD and what you get is what you get. It is a constantly evolving platform. And when done properly, it really needs to grow with your business. And They will also do releases 3 times a year. So Salesforce themselves are constantly adding new clouds, new features that you can proactively offer to your users. So there is some maintenance involved, but all of this to say Salesforce is really important, and the chance that you will run into a Salesforce project as a generalist BA, I would say is very high because a lot of companies use it. And also, to be perfectly frank, the licenses are very expensive. So once they kind of get hooked on those contracts, it's hard to get out of Salesforce. Kind of like the mafia sometimes. Just can't get out. All right. So what makes Salesforce projects unique? So the important thing to note with Salesforce projects is that they are brownfield projects. So when we talk about greenfield, we're talking about like nothing exists prior to you going into this IT initiative. So with greenfield projects, everything's custom. You have all the flexibility in the world. Any idea is a potentially a good idea and can possibly get built because you're just building. You're just coding the whole thing. When you've got a project like Salesforce where they're going to be more brownfield, what we're saying is that you're building this on existing code. Salesforce is a platform. There's a pile of code underneath it. Um, yes, it's flexible. It's very flexible. But there are some limitations to that flexibility. So, you may have to code things a certain way. You'd have to use Apex. You may be limited to Salesforce's security model. So those are the limitations that are important to keep in mind when you're going into this project. And while there is that kind of custom while there is that like code platform, and you're building on top of it, you can customize Salesforce. So you can really, really customize Salesforce, which is one of the reasons why people love it, because it can really shape itself to the needs of your business. So you could also theoretically build everything on Salesforce as well, but wow, would that be a bad idea? And that's really when we're talking about the pitfalls of Salesforce projects. That's where I think it's really important that we acknowledge that Salesforce having kind of this built-in platform it's really important that we understand those limitations, we understand those capabilities, we understand what features we have so that we're not just going and making everything custom right away. So if Salesforce is such a pain, why should we use it? The nice thing with Salesforce, it can solve for most business problems. Obviously, based on that slide with all the icons, it has a very, very robust product suite. You want to do marketing stuff, it's got marketing. You want to do data stuff, cloud stuff, e-commerce, sales, service, it's got you covered. And if it doesn't have you covered, Salesforce being a platform also has what we call the App Exchange. So it would be the equivalent of your app store on your iPhone. So like iPhone has a platform and you can go to the app store to get add-ons. Salesforce has the App Exchange. You can get add-ons to Salesforce. And there are also a lot of integrators that will get onto the App Exchange. So you've got things like DocuSign, which maybe isn't built on the Salesforce platform, but a lot of folks that use Salesforce want to integrate their Salesforce orgs with DocuSign. And so DocuSign is an App Exchange partner. With Salesforce, there's also the ability to be agile because you don't have to build everything from scratch. You can kind of shift things a bit. That you can make things scalable. It has those capabilities. It's low code, so you don't necessarily need an army of developers to actually get something functioning and scalable and architected well on the Salesforce platform. You can have people that are just configuration experts on the Salesforce platform. Also, because it does have a lot of things pre-built, and Salesforce has done a really good job over the years of really building in features that would kind of, I would consider them kind of like the lowest common denominator for a lot of the most common business processes that you'd see out in the corporate world, and even for specific industries. There are even some clouds that are specific to industries. Because it has some of that stuff built in, you do get that reduced time to value, that reduced effort, and also that reduced risk. It will force you to kind of adjust your business processes and rethink your business processes so that you can use that value that Salesforce brings by having that baseline of the most common best practice business processes. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about like, I remember, and again, maybe aging, dating myself here, but like, I remember when I first got into sales ops, like I would have to keep track of the salespeople's funnels on an Excel sheet. And yes, we kept track of opportunities on like a different sheet. Yes, we kept track of what percentage to close. These are things that are already pre-built in, for example, Salesforce Sales Cloud. The idea of an opportunity, the idea of a funnel. And so that's what I mean by that lowest common denominator. The things that you would see over and over in various companies are things that Salesforce strives to really build kind of out of the box with their platform. So what role do business analysts play on Salesforce projects? So generally, um, I would say business analysis in Salesforce land is a little bit like the Wild Wild West right now. So what I mean by that, business analysis as a practice has existed for a very, very long time. Salesforce, again, has been around since, 99, which sounds like a long time ago, but in IT terms, like really Salesforce's focus, I would say, gosh, those first 20 years was really on administrators. They needed people and really focused on upskilling people to run the thing. So it was really the age of the Salesforce admin. It was really the age of the Salesforce developer. And business analysis really wasn't a thing that people thought about when they implemented Salesforce until, it really became official as a career path on Salesforce's learning management platform Trailhead in November 2020. And the certification, which I had the honor of helping out with, wasn't released until like last year. So it's wonderful that now Salesforce is kind of coming up with the times and understanding that the basis really of any successful Salesforce project is business analysis. They spent so much time with pushing and promoting admins and developers that a lot of companies, when they were implementing Salesforce, didn't really do that kind of customization that it needed to make it optimized for their business. And that's where business analysis really comes in when it comes to Salesforce projects. One of the nice parts about the certification coming out is that it is starting to standardize what the role should look like in a best practice sense for folks that are working on Salesforce projects. So you can see the sections of that exam. We're talking customer discovery, collaboration with stakeholders, business process mapping, requirements gathering, user stories, and development support and user acceptance. It's pretty closely aligned with, I would say, a typical Salesforce project lifecycle. I know when you're talking about project life cycles, you guys might have different types. There's kind of the generic IT thing, but I wanted to kind of touch on what the BA does in each part, and also point out that I don't know. I had a conversation with a more generalist BA fairly recently, said that our IT projects, BAs kind of tend to live in the maintenance mode, taking feedback, and if there's a request, writing those stories and then putting it through, and are rarely in the current state mapping and the discovery portion. And I will say for Salesforce projects, and I could be wrong on that. That's just a conversation that I had, but I will say for Salesforce projects, when people think of Salesforce BAs, at least today, people are usually thinking about them in terms of that first analyze stage. So they're thinking about discovery, doing the business process maps, and writing those user stories. Almost every Salesforce project is some form of, I don't know, agile. They like to say it's agile, but it's usually a little bit of waterfall mixed in. But that's a fairly typical Salesforce engagement. We'll go through the typical agile ceremonies. and usually be delivered in user story form rather than business requirements document form. Just generally, I'm sure there's a waterfall Salesforce project somewhere, but talking about most common scenarios. During that analyze stage, you've got BAs that are, again, doing that discovery. So what are your requirements? Trying to get an understanding of what the scope for the project is. Doing business process maps and writing those user stories with acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria, hugely important, I think, for Salesforce projects, and really anywhere, but I have a whole session on YouTube about user stories for Salesforce. Um, Once the user stories are written, they're validated by the business. The BA's role will change a little bit when you're going into the build stage. So now you're going into your sprints. You're still probably doing some discovery, some analysis for things that are going to be built in later sprints. But while the build is going on, the BA's role will evolve a bit to start usually, and this is, again, I'm just kind of touching on common roles that I've seen BAs play, but oftentimes the BAs will be doing the demos. So they'll be doing the sprint demos at the end of however long the sprint is for the stakeholders. They'll also be collecting feedback and writing user stories on that, or updating user stories if there are changes to user stories maybe that were already built. There's also going to be that ongoing communication. So if a developer has a question or acceptance criteria seems a little ambiguous, or if they think that they should remove one, or even if there's a technical problem, the BA is really that bridge between the dev team and the business stakeholders. And also during the build, which is when a lot of testing is done, the BAs will oftentimes uh, change their acceptance criteria into what will be test scripts for UAT. So what's the click path to get to pass on each of those acceptance criteria, writing that down. And sometimes the BAs will even conduct UAT. When a project's delivered, I've often seen Salesforce BAs involved in the change management piece, writing up documentation, and actually putting together training curriculums. Of course, while we would love it if there were Salesforce trainers all over the place, there aren't. So BAs kind of tend to wear a lot of hats on Salesforce projects. It is what it is. And I will say the larger the initiative or the more complex the Salesforce org, the more a BA can kind of stay in their business analysis lane. But these are all things that I would say, if you're a Salesforce BA on a project, be prepared to possibly have to take on these tasks. And then when you're at the operate period, so you're in maintenance mode, the BA will collect feedback and do ongoing training. You know, if somebody has to get onboarded. I'll pause here. Do we have any questions right now?
We do not. We have, well, we did have a question about the needing recording, but that was it. So
okay,
we're good to go.
Cool. All right. So a couple of notes that I think are a little bit more Salesforce specific for each stage. So at that analyze stage, I think a current state is a must. It's so important to understand that current state and to keep the technology out of it. I think a lot of times, especially when you get enthusiastic Salesforce people like me or an enthusiastic architect, they'll go in and be like, I can solve all your problems with Salesforce, and you should do this object with this flow and this thing and this automation. You want to avoid solutioning. Do not solution when you're doing discovery. We really need, when we're trying to get those user stories, and you know, it's best practice on user stories anyway, you want to make sure that there is as little to no technology mentioned as possible. Keep it as open as possible. What you're trying to do is get those requirements and those user stories in such a way that when you do have that Salesforce architect that comes in to figure out how to use Salesforce to solution it, that they will have some flexibility. So that's a big thing. And yeah, current state a must. If they don't do current state, I've seen projects where they're just like, no, we really just let's just go straight into the build. It's always ends in disaster. And I say some of this stuff because, again, I reiterate that business analysis is still kind of a, yes, it's been around for a few years in Salesforce land, but there's still a lot of education that needs to happen when it comes to Salesforce projects. So educating internal users, educating IT teams, educating clients if you're a consultant. And so part of that is getting them to understand the value of documenting a current state, getting them to understand the value of a gap analysis. The other thing that I think is notable for Salesforce projects in the analyze stage is in business process mapping. Yes, there's a lot of different ways to map out a business process, but Salesforce has a particular one that it really focuses on its learning management platform, which is called Universal Process Notation. Not wildly popular, but I will say it is actually my favorite way to map business processes. And I have a slide on it so you can kind of see what that looks like. I've used Lucidchart, Miro, and Elements Cloud to do universal process notation. I am a big fan. In the build stage, I think something that's specific to Salesforce BAs is that oftentimes you are going to have enough know-how to be able to justify design decisions. So while the business might request certain things, the dev team might come back and say it's just not worth building that. And so again, being that bridge and being able to communicate effectively with your business stakeholders and getting them to understand, what are the long-term risks of doing things a certain way versus not. Again, Salesforce being a platform, there are a lot of different ways to solve for things. It's not like, oh, we're always going to do this one process this one way. Salesforce is so customizable for a number of business processes, a number of use cases. And so it's important that when we're considering Salesforce as a solution, that we're not just thinking about, okay, how do we deliver on this ask? It's how do we deliver this in a way that we can also maintain it? Because again, Salesforce isn't the CD you install. I know, I'm old, but it's something that has to really evolve with your business. It has to live, and you have to be able to take care of it. You don't want to bog it down with a bunch of technical debt. So being able to justify design decisions is going to be important. So you need to be able to speak intelligently about the platform and the features and the pros and cons. And then with delivery, understanding Salesforce sandboxes and DevOps and how that whole process, how things go from user story into production is going to be important because you will likely have to talk about that and do some documentation surrounding that. And then at the operate stage, I touched on it a little bit earlier, but Salesforce has 3 releases a year. So when while we're also gathering feedback from users on things that they would like, features they'd like to see, we also have to know that, geez, there's a release coming from Salesforce. They are adding some features. Almost every Salesforce professional that has been in it long enough has a story of them building some like really elaborate custom solution on Salesforce only to have Salesforce release it as an out-of-the-box feature the next year. It happens, but you have to prepare for that stuff. And at that point, let's say that does happen. Okay, well then how are we going to remove this technical debt of all the stuff that we custom built so that we can use the out-of-the-box features? Because really one of the best practices with Salesforce is that you want to go as low code as you can. Custom is great for when it's needed, but if you can leverage those out of the box features, that is preferred.
Vanessa, can I jump in here? We've got a couple questions for you before you move on to the next slide. So we do have somebody say, do you feel it, and it's Rohit who asked the question, is a BA required to know how to code in today's scenario where developers are also stepping up to do activities like discovery?
I will say I've not seen a whole lot of developers doing discovery on Salesforce projects, at least not from what I've seen. I mean, I wouldn't discount it, especially if you have a really small team. I could see that happening. But no, BAs rarely. I would say, if anything, it's helpful to be able to read code, but I would not expect a BA to write code. I would, though, expect a BA to be able to be hands-on with Salesforce. So if you're going to be delivering those demos, it's important to be able to navigate the platform, navigate your Salesforce org. I also think another role that the BA often tends to play on Salesforce projects, and I guess I didn't quite call it out here, is we rarely get a Salesforce designer on our projects. And so the BAs, often as the person who is closest to those business stakeholders and really the person who tends to have a lot of empathy, will often play that design role on Salesforce projects. So I don't know if you've ever seen the scenario, if you've been on a Salesforce project or not, but I know for me, I have written user stories with acceptance criteria, and I'll have a developer build it out. All those acceptance criteria will pass. I will look at the thing and go, nobody's going to use this. There's like 12 clicks and the fields are not in the right spot. And those aren't all necessarily things that you can, that you're going to put into acceptance criteria. And so the BA, it is always nice, especially before you do that demo, to kind of do a once over like that of that end-to-end business process or that or end-to-end of that feature, and make sure that it is a good user experience. There is also a user experience certification that Salesforce has that I also really recommend to BAs as well, to kind of develop some of those skills. But it is one of those differentiation things that I think really does help BAs on Salesforce projects.
Perfect.
And you said there's another question?
Speaking of certification, and we can talk about it now or later if it's more appropriate, but there's a couple questions around certification, that topic. And then there was one additional question that was around, and it was from Twinkle, how to deal with a situation where the project team stakeholders don't focus on documentation and don't want to spend time on the analysis phase. They just want to jump in and start building it.
Ugh, cry. I've been on too many of those projects. Well, the certifications I will address towards the end of the session in my resources section, because I do think it's really important for Salesforce projects. As far as the folks that listen, all you can do is your best. So do your best to educate, do your best to outline the risks of not getting a current state, of not shifting left. It's one of those things, and I try to explain it to I've tried to explain it to clients when I was a consultant, and certainly I try to do that education internally when I am internal. But the idea of it being that the less you do up front, the more you're going to have to do in the end. The more we're going to have problems in UAT. Oh God, I was on this project. I mean, it was like a $20 million Salesforce project. It was gigantic. There were like 100 consultants on it, and I think we had 1,000 user stories, and then we ended up with over 1,000 like bugs and changes, and that was just a lack of business analysis. It was such a high profile project, and just folks wanted to charge in, and and it there's only so much you can do, and there's only so much you can manage up. So thankfully, business analysis, is a project-based role. So sometimes you can just kind of like, find your happy place and just go, if the client is happy, the project is a success. If the client is happy, the project is a success. And then, wait for the next one. Also, there is that joy, and I have had to have the conversation with BAs occasionally where they go, oh my God, this project's, I haven't been able to do business analysis properly and everything's going nuts. It's going to ruin my career. I will reassure you that at the end of every IT initiative, I wouldn't even say Salesforce specific, I have yet to see an IT leader say that a project was a failure. No matter how bad the project is and what a disaster it is, at the end, every executive and IT leaders, yes, we did it, success. So like I said, it's the nice part of being a project-based role. They'll be the next one, but you got to do your best to educate, outline the risks. And sometimes it's like, okay, I'm going to move forward with this because I don't have any power to do anything else, but I want you to at least acknowledge the risks and say that you're okay moving forward, understanding what the risks are. I hope that answers the question. Cool. All right, I'm going to get a sip real quick. Okay. Just wanted to show you guys a little bit of universal process notation. There are a few principles with universal process notation. I do recommend checking it out. It's a pretty neat way to do business process mapping. But worth knowing if you are interested in Salesforce projects. Not everybody does them. lot of Salesforce projects do standard business process mapping, but it's, again, good vocabulary word. Okay. Touching on some common Salesforce projects. These are the ones that I have run into the most in my career. First is the simple request. So simple request often starts, and this could be whether you're a consultant or even internal, like you get a case or a ticket. Oh, can you just add a field that, dot, dot, dot. Well, I spoke to, I'm going to butcher his last name, Michael Drzwecki, I think it is. He's wonderful. He's a Salesforce Golden Hoodie, 28 times certified, and also a genius. He actually showed me that these are the 12 questions that he asks, even just to get a field added to Salesforce. So even something as minor as a field, you really should be, as a best practice, doing that business analysis, because again, Salesforce is a platform. There are considerations. It's not just like put in a field. It is how is this used in the business process? Who are the people that are going to use it? What's the data supposed to look like? Who should be able to see the data? What are the security considerations? Should it integrate with anything? Are there any performance issues? Do we need to report on it? There's so many questions that go into it. And so even a simple request, it is often more successfully delivered when there's business analysis involved, is basically the takeaway at the end of the day. The next one, and this one's kind of a 3-for-1 here. So the next one that I would consider the easier type of Salesforce project would be when you're doing a completely new implementation. So a company that doesn't have a CRM today, or they have Salesforce and you're just kind of adding a feature. So maybe they have Sales Cloud and they're trying to add Service Cloud, or they're trying to, add DocuSign, or they want to bring the legal team onto Salesforce. So adding a feature or adding an add-on. So, the add-on would be more like the DocuSign or an additional cloud. So the questions that you're going to start thinking about when you have these kinds of projects is, do we want to buy something? Do we want to integrate something? Do we want to configure something? When I say configure, I'm talking about clicks, not code. So more Salesforce administrative duties, your configuration folks, or do we want to actually code it? Is it something that would be worth maintaining in the long term with code? And so I took a picture here of the App Exchange, and we have on the right Appy, the mascot. Salesforce really likes mascots, and if you really get involved in the Salesforce community, you will likely get plushies. So with these types of projects, new implementation, a feature, and add-on, again, we are focusing on business processes. We don't want to get into how we're going to solution them yet. We really just need to understand what the current state is, so that we can, once we have that current state, we can work with the folks that know Salesforce. And as a BA, you will not be responsible, or you shouldn't be responsible. If you are responsible, you should be paid more as a solution architect. But the BA won't be responsible for coming up with what the solution is, but they should have a voice in what the solution is, because they are that close to the stakeholders, and they should understand the Salesforce platform. And part of the BA's duty when you're on Salesforce projects is really to coach them into what's possible. So when you are in that discovery phase, in that analysis phase of that life cycle, it's really, really important that you're not just making it a free-for-all and, hey, the sky's the limit. Salesforce. As folks start talking to you about their needs, their business needs, you will start, as a Salesforce professional, if you've gotten familiar with the platform, start connecting those dots on, okay, this could go in this direction, or this could go in this direction. It could be this feature, or maybe it could be this feature. They might need an approval process. They might need a flow. And you'll start being able to formulate those questions that will kind of lead to those features. And that's what I mean in the coaching them into what's possible. The unfortunate thing is, if you don't have that strong base and understanding how Salesforce works or what the platform can do, or the features that come out of the box. I have seen it where a BA that is unfamiliar with Salesforce and doesn't actually do that work before going into one of these projects will end up writing a bunch of user stories that will lead to a bunch of custom code, which will lead to a bunch of maintenance nightmares along the lines, because there's so much code, and Salesforce is not meant to be a super code heavy platform. It is meant to be a low code platform with some customization as needed. The other thing that's going to come up in these types of projects is, you want to, it'll help you if you understand best practices as far as architecture, and also the app exchange. So as you start working these Salesforce projects, especially if you've worked for a number of companies, or if you've done an engagement as a consultant, you will start seeing kind of some of the same processes, and problems over and over and over, and you will get a better sense of how to solve them, and that will make you even a better Salesforce BA. Again, really important to be able to communicate the trade-offs and the risks, when you're dealing with these new implementations, features, or add-ons. The next type of project, and unfortunately I've run into this one a lot, is the tear it down and start again project. So this is the either bye-bye tech debt or possibly another CRM, or maybe Google Sheets. So what I mean by this, so a little bit earlier, I said that Salesforce really kind of spent that first 20 years focusing on administrators and developers and not enough on business analysis, not enough even on design or DevOps, and all those things are becoming more important in these years, these recent years. What that means, though, is a lot of those early adopters of Salesforce, which were usually these big enterprise level companies, have Salesforce orgs that they didn't really know how to maintain. And so I have worked a number of projects where the thing was just architected so badly. The administrators were order takers. So any squeaky wheel, usually from the sales team, that needed something, the administrator would act more like an IT, kind of IT support, where they would just deliver every ticket, as opposed to really examining whether, asking those 12 questions to see if it was healthy for the Salesforce org to even build the thing in the first place. And it gets to the point where the thing is so laden with tech debt and there's no documentation because there wasn't any business analysis done on it, that they will actually tear the thing down and start the org again from scratch. Happens all the time. And these types of projects, of course, it's like, well, Salesforce failed us the first time, or didn't, ended up turning into this behemoth the first time. Why would they keep going for it? Salesforce is a great platform. It is just, you have to educate yourself on how to maintain it properly, and the folks who are responsible for it at organizations have to be continuous learners. It's just, I would say, not even optional if they want to maintain a healthy Salesforce org. So when you're dealing with these tear it down and start again, so we have a Salesforce org, we are going to deprecate it and get a shiny new org and move all the business processes over. Again, current state, so important. We're not looking at, we don't necessarily want to think about just, okay, this is how you did in the old org, let's just move that. Lift and shifts, I would say, are usually a terrible idea for these types of things. You want to be able to understand what is this business process? Take Salesforce out of it. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Okay, then show me your current state. How do you currently do this in Salesforce, or how do you do it in Microsoft Dynamics? I've also had those conversations. Think about, how could this business process be improved? When I was doing Microsoft Dynamics tear down and start again, there were certain processes that had to be done a certain way in Dynamics because of the way that Dynamics was architected. So it didn't have the solution, or it didn't have the way to do things the way that they really wanted to, but Salesforce did. So it's a good time to really re-examine every process, could the business process be improved? Is there a better way to solution this? We don't need to do it the same way we did it before. So is it well architected? Is it scalable? Is it low code first? Are we leveraging the out of the box features properly? Are there updated features or best practices we can leverage? And is it worth changing? So, there are going to be budgetary constraints, time constraints. So thinking about like how bad should this change? How much should this change? How much analysis should we do? And finding that right balance, because ultimately you're not trying to bring your technical debt into your shiny new org. If you can leave the technical debt behind, that is ideal, but it's usually going to be kind of some balance in there. You're also going to want to review your integrations, review your user experience. There's still a lot of orgs that, especially for early adopters that are still on Salesforce Classic, which is kind of the old UI that Salesforce doesn't even update anymore, but it's such a heavy lift to move to their new UI Lightning that those turn into giant projects. So review the user experience. Do those fields need to be there? Are the users kind of scrolling? I worked with a client that had, no joke, 800 fields on their account on their account object, and actually had another 400 more, so they had to build a custom object to hold the other, like it was like account 2. It was, think about that user experience. Do they really need those 800 fields? Does every user need to see those 800 fields? And then again, governance for the future. So we don't want to have to tear the thing down and restart it every 5 years, because it turned into Frankenstein, and we just couldn't manage it. So making sure that your client or your internal organization is starting to get that governance in place, so that when that new Salesforce org is released and we have sunsetted the old Salesforce org, that we have standards in place as far as coding. We have standards in place as far as project delivery, that we're going to be doing business analysis anytime somebody asks for a simple field, things like that. Getting that documented and in place, and educating those users on how to maintain a healthy Salesforce org is really important. Otherwise, you're going to be redoing the thing every 5 to 10 years. And I've seen it happen, that's sad.
We've got a couple questions for you.
Oh, sure.
So Twinkle has asked, is there a way as a Salesforce business analyst we can verify if the system is well architected or not? As I'm not an experienced Salesforce BA, I generally face challenges to understand the Salesforce project architecture.
So Salesforce actually has full-time evangelists for Salesforce well architected. So if you go to, I believe it's architect.salesforce.com, you will see the best practices there as far as Salesforce architecture is concerned. And they have great guidance, great guidelines, and the Salesforce architect evangelists like Susanna Plaisted, besides being an absolutely lovely person, she puts out YouTube videos every week talking about how to keep your Salesforce org well architected. And there are times where, you know what, technical debt, I don't think I've ever seen a Salesforce org without any technical debt, or perfectly architected. But certainly those are, anytime there's a Band-Aid in place, okay, well, we have to take note of that and try and fix that down the line so that we don't have to tear this down and start again. And especially if it's something like foundational, like when you're doing that initial implementation, it is so important to get it right. And so oftentimes, like me right now as a product owner, before I have a consultant come in and just kind of have their developers start building on the thing that I'm going to have to live with for the rest of my career at that company. I make sure that I get down what my standards are as far as configuration, my standards are as far as code goes. So what are my naming conventions? How do I like my descriptions done? And those are things that you can get guidance from architect.salesforce.com, or connecting to other resources in the Salesforce ecosystem to kind of give you guidance on how to create governance for your Salesforce org. And I'm going to touch on a few more of those resources.
Perfect. And then John asked, so some context, he's a BA for a sales team, and the project that he's on, he's asking, do you have any guidance or best practices for an organization that has more than one sales team, but they are unrelated in what they sell, how they sell? What should he keep in mind?
Oh, That's absolutely something that Salesforce can do. And so I think capturing that in your user stories is going to be important. Now, if you are actually building this in Salesforce yourself, again, you should be paid as a solution architect. You shouldn't be responsible for deciding how to do this in Salesforce, but Salesforce can absolutely accommodate multiple sales teams, and either give them visibility to each other's things or not, or give visibility only to certain things. That is, kind of part of the wonders of the Salesforce security model. Very easy actually to give both of those salespeople different experiences. But the things that you want to keep in mind is, because it is a brownfield kind of project, because there is the Salesforce platform, you want to make sure that both of those teams are aligned on what they mean by certain things, particularly if they are if they're standard fields or standard things within Salesforce. So for example, if this one calls it an opportunity and this one calls it, I don't know, like possibilities, I'm just making that up. You got to get them to align on that. And you're going to want to push them to call it opportunities because that's what Salesforce calls it. Make sure that, if that they both understand what the meaning of an account is. If they do have fields that, even if they're custom fields, and you understand that they mean the same thing, but they're calling it something different, again, getting that alignment so that you don't want to create a whole set of fields here and a whole set of fields here, and then have a bunch of fields that actually are the same thing, but you're building them twice. As much as you can align those business processes before they hit Salesforce and get folks on the same lingo, and really, as much as you can align their processes as well, it'll help as well, and also probably be better for the business. But you can give them, if they really are two totally separate sales teams, you can absolutely build that experience. Just be really mindful of the out of the box fields that you'll get out of Salesforce. Hopefully that helps. And I've got some resources later on too that might also help. Cool. All right. Last one is org merges, better together. This happens a lot. You'll have a company that will acquire another company, and both of them will have Salesforce, and they'll coexist for a time, but then want to realize the synergies of their investment in acquiring that second company, and so they'll want to merge their Salesforce orgs. So besides thinking about like, okay, is it going to be your place or mine? Are we going to merge this way? Are we going to merge that way? Or are we going to just both merge into a completely new org? That's going to be important. And kind of to John's question on what do you do if you have two separate sales teams? When you have two different companies that all of a sudden are the same company, again, alignment is really important. Documentation is really important, and change management is really, really, really important. Key to these types of projects. So it's not just going through their business process, but talking about, especially if they already have existing Salesforce orgs, what does this field mean to you? And getting a really clear understanding so that you can start making those connections between those two organizations, so that when you roll out the unified Salesforce, everybody will be on the same page and be able to be speaking the same language and understanding what those things mean. An exercise that I often do if I have an org merge is, because remember, they have existing Salesforce orgs. I'll say, okay, let's go onto your account page, and I'll do this with every persona. I'll say, let's go through every field here and tell me when you use it. Oftentimes I'm crossing out field after field after field, particularly with that one client that had like 800 plus. They're like, oh yeah, never use that. Oh yeah, that field, we had that for that one promotion 3 years ago. Nobody ever took it off. So you're just constantly removing tech debt, but it'll also unearth business processes that maybe weren't obvious when you initially got the requirements, and also will start getting you understanding specifically what each of those fields means, so that when you speak to the folks at the next org, you'll be able to start building that alignment. Also, I've sometimes put them both in a room together. Like, hey guys, let's do some show and tell, and let's talk through how are we going to, what's our future state look like with this. So really, really important alignment, documentation, and change management for these things, because you've got to it's a whole dance of, all right, when are we going to turn this org off? When are we going to turn this one off? When are we going to turn this one on? Which teams are moving when? Those projects get really, really hairy. They can go sideways really quickly. So it's really important to be detail oriented for these org merges. Okay, and then home stretch here, resources to prepare for your Salesforce project. I'll start off by saying, again, Salesforce, nobody can know everything. You will likely always kind of feel a little bit impostery. I know I do. I never have all the answers. I'm really good at pushing off folks if I don't have answers, because I have to do that because Salesforce. Or I want to make sure that I'm not solutioning. But what's nice is business analysts, Salesforce business analysis is really a team sport. So you're oftentimes going to be working with devs, you're going to be working with architects, you're going to be working with administrators. And it being a team sport, you really can lean on your team for answers, for success, and you'll mostly be surrounded by people that want to help you succeed, especially if you're a consultant on a client engagement, but even if you're an internal or kind of, if you're internal, you are almost to a certain extent being that trusted internal advisor to your organization. So resources, certification. Okay. Now, it used to be a prerequisite that you needed the admin certification to take the Salesforce business analyst certification. That is no longer the case. That being said, I think it's still really important that you either start with admin or platform app builder. Most of the job postings that I see for Salesforce BAs are not necessarily asking for Salesforce BA certifications. They're asking for admin certifications. The admin cert will give you a overall understanding of the Salesforce platform. And again, that is the information that's really important so that you aren't just kind of going into these projects and turning it into a bunch of custom code. So understanding that platform, getting that platform app builder or the admin certification, I think is really, really key, particularly if you're working in, the sales or the service side. I think the BA cert is nice and will teach you some business analysis as it pertains to Salesforce projects, but I think your time is probably better spent understanding the Salesforce platform. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be this particular administrator certification. Like if you're a marketing person and you want to solve marketing problems, there's a marketing cloud certification. There's over 40 credentials. And if we go into super badges, which are also credentials that are on Salesforce's learning management platform, I mean, there might be over 100 credentials. There are numerous ways to specialize in the Salesforce ecosystem. So it would behoove you to get credentials and study and learn for projects that you want to be on. I certainly have gotten certifications before I was ever put on projects, just because I was like really interested in those particular business processes or helping those specific types of workers. Or if you're already exposed to a project, it couldn't hurt to just get the certification because you're kind of living in it day to day.
While we're on the
Yes.
topic of certification,
yes.
So you've definitely answered Paula's question. She had asked earlier about whether she's right now taking training geared towards the admin certification, but she was asking if she should continue to do that or go straight to the BA certification. I think you've answered that already for her. Pat asked, does Vanessa suggest everyone who is doing Salesforce BAing to get BA certified? I'll put a quick plug in here. Of course you should get IIBA BA certified. What are you talking about? But I don't think that's what he meant. Maybe you could answer that question.
Sure. So I will say, while I think everybody should get IIBA certified, such a great foundation for business analysis. I will say I've literally never seen a Salesforce BA job posting that asked for it. I have seen the Salesforce business analyst certification, which is a Salesforce credential, be a nice to have. Rarely required though. Job postings for Salesforce BA roles. Again, remember that certification only came out last year, so it's still kind of a baby certification in Salesforce land. That admin certification, though, I have often seen it be a requirement to be a Salesforce BA on a project. Again, when you are depending on the size of the team and the complexity of the project, you as a Salesforce BA will often be expected to be hands-on with the Salesforce platform. So you may even have to build something sometime. You may have to actually move those fields around yourself. You may have to build a validation rule. Those are all things that would not be beyond asking a BA for help on, particularly if they're a new BA on a Salesforce project. And so getting that admin certification, I think, is probably for me, is really the first step to being a good Salesforce BA. That being said, and I'll touch on the question that I did already answer. That admin certification is I'm trying not to cuss. It's a drag. It's like you're talking about like 3 months, and it's hard. It is uh it is a hard certification to get. The Salesforce BA certification is a bit easier, especially if you already have some experience as a business analyst. You might be able to do that one cold. So if you just need like a morale boost, like, maybe go for that Salesforce BA one, just so you could say you have a Salesforce certification. Certainly that'll be better than having 0 certifications if you're looking for a Salesforce BA role. But I am not one to gatekeep certs. Do whatever cert path works for you. If you like to, treat certs like Pokemon and collect them all, like, more power to you. If you get a free voucher for a specific exam that you're, for whatever, go for it. If you just like studying and getting trophies, like, that's cool. Like, go for it. Whatever motivates you to keep learning. I think we as a Salesforce community are better for folks that get certifications, because it means that you've actually studied the material.
Right. And Bilal had asked, like, and maybe this is a good question. If you're not in the Salesforce world right now, do you recommend a Salesforce BA certification, or sort of how do you get into the Salesforce world?
I will touch on that and intro my last resources. So
Perfect.
I think it depends on how you're approaching it. If you are interested in an actual career as a Salesforce BA, like, Salesforce is the thing that you want to work on, that Salesforce admin certification is really going to be the thing that I think you should focus on. It does tend to be the ticket to entry for Salesforce projects, because you can't be hands-on if you don't understand, you don't want to break the thing. So that's the direction I would recommend. Now, that being said, a lot of us are generalist BAs that just had Salesforce kind of show up at at your company one day, and all of a sudden you were told to be the BA for that project. You might not have the 3 months to dedicate to getting that admin certification. So there are other resources, and that's where I'm kind of moving into here. Actually, I put together with Josh Matthews, my podcast co-host, this thing called the Expand Exchange, which just honestly is just a list of my favorite resources for Salesforce stuff. Because when I go into Salesforce projects, because it does solve so many problems, again, I'm never going to know everything. I've had to go in, partly blind, where, okay, I've got a client that wants to implement Salesforce Maps. Well, I've never implemented Salesforce Maps before in my life. But I don't have the time to go do that studying and get that credential. So how do you get that information quickly so that you can still be an effective Salesforce BA and understand the feature set and ask the right questions? That's where I think leveraging some of these other resources is helpful. So Salesforce has a lot of great resources. They have Trailhead. Trailhead is the best learning management system I've ever seen in my life. If you don't have a Trailhead account, I highly recommend you get one. It is free, and it's also kind of fun. There's also Trailblazer community boards that are often really active. So you can usually post a question on there and people will be responsive. There's also knowledge articles, which are boring. I prefer Trailhead over knowledge articles, but a lot of times Trailhead will lead you to knowledge articles, which will get you to the information that you need. So before I implemented Salesforce Maps, okay, well, what are the common ways that people use Salesforce Maps? I did a few Trailhead modules, and I felt prepared enough to go into that and not kind of turn it into a big code fest. There's, of course, the certification studies, which will help you. And then also reaching out to the community. Salesforce is known for having a very, very robust community. And so reaching out to Salesforce MVPs, which are like most valuable professionals, going to Salesforce conferences or going to local community groups, people are super friendly. And there's even a MVP directory where you can even filter people by specialty. And I've just sent LinkedIn messages to MVPs before asking them, stupid Salesforce questions, and they're usually really nice about it. Also, communities, Ohana Slack. Ohana Slack has over 10,000 Salesforce professionals on it. It's just a Slack channel. It's run by folks in the Salesforce community, and people ask questions there all day. You could either ask a question yourself or just search in the search bar for the thing that you're looking for, and likely somebody has asked that question before. It is a great resource. Twitter's also great too. There's an Ask Force hashtag, and I get a lot of my Salesforce information from Twitter. There's also lots of blogs and YouTube channels. The Salesforce community is a very generous community, so my favorite ones are in the Expand Exchange. So yeah, it's hard to be a Salesforce BA, but it's very rewarding. And I will end on it's also okay to Google. And if you have to chat GPT a couple things, like, it's okay. We're in the age of AI. Sometimes chat GPT is a good direction giver as well when you're kind of going in totally blind. So on that note, thank you all for having me. I think I just got it exactly at the hours. So plus I got in a few questions. So if there's any additional questions, I am happy to answer them. I will just kind of leave this on the screen though, in case anybody wants to grab my handles, and then I will.
Perfect. Well, while that's there, we did have a question from Claire, which I think might be a good one to talk about, because we had a number of people join us after you first started talking, and just asking if you can give like your elevator pitch, if you will, if you want to call it that old phrase, about what Salesforce is and sort of the capabilities it offers. I know that's a monumental question in terms of what it actually is, but if you were going to give that, couple minute talk about what it is for somebody who's never heard of it, maybe you could just let people know.
Yeah. Salesforce at its core is a customer relationship management software, CRM. So it's to manage your interactions with your customers. Now, that being said, while it started that way, it has acquired a lot of other businesses over the course of the 20-something years that it's been around. And so now I would think of it more as a platform to solve pretty much any business problem you can think of. So any major department or major industry, Salesforce likely has a product in its product suite that would cater to that particular business process, to that particular department, to that particular industry. So there's a government cloud. There's a financial services cloud that has, things where it talks about borrowers and households. There's a nonprofit cloud. So you can, has a whole section on grants in nonprofit cloud. Salesforce has really basically kind of built a base and it's a very customizable base, which is what makes it wonderful, to really be the heart of the operations of your business when it's done well. I hope that helps.
Perfect. Maybe what I'll do, just out of interest of time, is we have a couple of actual chapter things we have to go over, but there was a couple more questions that just got added last minute in the chat. And Vanessa, if you'd be willing to have a quick look at those, that would be terrific, from Ella and from John.
You got it.
In the meantime, if Sarani's still with us and wants to put up our chapter slide.
Yeah, I'm here. And do you want me to share and go ahead with our events and all?
Please, yes.
Yeah. Meanwhile, my wonderful deputy Nikhil will share our survey link there. So I want to ask our participants to participate in our survey. You can click on that and let us know how we did. And thank you so much, Vanessa. You did, it was so informative, and we learned a lot today. Thank you. Thank you so much. And let me share my screen.
Thank you.
Hope everybody can see my screen. So we have a couple of upcoming events. Our next event is our study group. So that will be on Tuesday, November 28, 2023. We will be discussing chapter 4 on Babok. So if you like to join with us, please go to our website and register for that. It will be from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And so our next chapter meeting will be in January, and that will be with Patrick Van Abema. We will be talking about another interesting topic, that is AI. Just like Salesforce, AI is a hot topic in these days in our business analysis market. So using AI in business analysis, unlocking opportunities and challenges. We'll be talking about that. That will be on January 16, 2024 from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And the next event is we will be having our Capital BA Day. This is our third Capital BA Day, Professional Development Conference. This will take place on May 17, 2024. We are still looking for volunteers to help us with our organizing committee. So if you are interested, please contact us through this email, or you can email me or anybody in our board. So that's about it. And if you want to get in touch with us to volunteering services or professional development, certifications, or if you have any general inquiries, these are our email addresses. You can contact us and we will get back to you as soon as we will be able to. If you have any questions, please let us know. And thank you so much for being with us today. And we appreciate that. And we will be able, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I think there are some questions. Yeah, over to you, Helen.
Yeah, somebody was asking if the May 19th BA Day is going to be a virtual event. Our goal is to be in person with the potential for a hybrid audience, but it depends on us getting volunteers and it depends on us locking in our venue. We're working on getting a venue now. So hopefully when we get to the January meeting, we'll have lots of news. If we're successful in locking down the venue and getting the volunteers that we need, we're actually hoping we'll be doing a call for speakers before the end of the calendar year in 2023. So lots of news, stay tuned. And as you already heard, it takes a village. So we look forward to having volunteers help us. All right.
Okay, I think we can wrap up for today.
Sounds
Again,
good.
Yeah, thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for being with us today.
Yes, thank you.
We really appreciate your time with us. And thank you so much, my wonderful board. Thank you, team, for being with us. Thank you, Helen. And participants, thank you so much with us. And we will be emailing this recording to you. Please give us 1 or 2 weeks and you will receive that. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay,
Thanks, everyone.
Evening.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.